The relationship between land and identity, Mobile, Mississippi, Gulf Coast, and the Creole memory. I keep coming back to the land. Not the land like acreage or pretty listings with historic charm slapped on it and painted for Instagram. I mean land as memory. Land as the one thing still standing there when the courthouse records go missing, when families stop talking because the truth got too heavy to carry out loud. Because I do believe that land talks. Not in some goofy movie magic way where the oak trees start giving speeches. I mean real life. The way a place can make your chest tighten before you even know why. Or the way you can stand somewhere and you have never technically been, but something says to you, we know you. But most of the time, people are too loud to hear it. We come in with our opinions, labels, maps, and modern assumptions. We want history to behave. We want everybody placed in the right box and properly explained. Bless your heart, history doesn't work that way, especially not on the Gulf Coast. The land on the coast has never been simple. French, Spanish, British, American, Catholic, Creole, multilingual, Native, African, free people of color, family alliances, old laws, new governments, people constantly having to figure out what changed and what still stood. Every time the flag changed, the question came back around. Who gets to belong here? Who gets their inheritance? Who will be remembered this time, and who gets erased? That is where land stops being background and starts becoming a witness. Because land remembers who walks on it, who worked it, who built on it, who buried their dead there, who stood in the doorway wondering if their children would be protected, whose tears were shed right here. The paper trail may get thin, the records can get messy. Somebody may conveniently lose a book, misfile a deed, or decide a woman's name is too inconvenient to keep repeating. But the land does not forget just because people do. That is the part that people miss. The evidence is not separate from the mystery. The evidence is part of it. A probate file might look dry from the outside. An old land case may look like somebody's dusty legal headache. But underneath all of the language is the bones. That's where you find out who was protected and who was used. For the Gulf Coast Creole families, land was never just land. It was belonging. People did not live history in neat state-shaped boxes. That is a modern habit. And honestly, maps have made us lazy. Family moves along water, along trade routes, kinship lines, through marriages, churches, work, survival, and opportunity. Mobile, Pascagoula, Biloxi, New Orleans, Pensacola. The bays, the rivers, the old roads, they were connected by people long before somebody decided where one state ended and another one began. Rooted does not always mean stationary. Sometimes rooted means you know what soil made you, even when the branches reach somewhere else. That is Gulf Coast to me. Families carry language, foodways, faith, naming patterns, knowledge, customs, pride, old wounds, and even silence. And sometimes that silence was not weakness. Sometimes it was survival. Because when laws change, when racial categories harden, when the American system became obsessed with putting people in boxes, some identities became dangerous, inconvenient, becoming whispers. That is why ancestral memory matters, because sometimes the official story is not just incomplete, it is intentionally narrowed. And when the paper trail gets thin, the land becomes another kind of witness. The cemeteries know. old roads? No. The riverbanks and the beachfronts become a holder of the stories gone by. The way the same family keeps showing up together, one place after another, land knows. That is why I'm not interested in history as a clean little timeline where everybody behaves themselves. That sounds adorable, but no, I am interested in the living mess of it all. The women standing in the doorway wondering what will happen to her children. The family that knows exactly who belongs, even if the law suddenly acts confused. The descendants generations later trying to gather the pieces that were never supposed to be found. This is where land and identity tie together, because land holds the answers to those hard questions. Who gets to inherit? Who gets to build? Who gets to stay? And once you start asking those questions, history stops being polite. To be marked by land is not always soft and pretty. Sometimes it means being targeted, threatened, rooted yet challenged. It is the double reality of families who had identity, land, and lineage, but lived inside systems that kept trying to rename them, reduce them, or erase them altogether. They almost succeeded. That speaks directly to the Mobile Creole experience, but it also speaks to the larger Gulf Coast story. So many people along the Gulf Coast carried layered identities of French, Spanish, African, Native, Caribbean, American, Catholic, Creole, free people of color, enslaved ancestors, landholders, displaced ancestors, whether documented or not. And instead of those layers being treated as richness, history often tries to flatten them into one box or another. But people are not check boxes. Land holds complexity. It holds contradictions, names written one way and then another. It holds children acknowledged in family memory, but courts try to erase them. Women who were known in their time, but blurred by later generations who did not know what to do with them. That is where rooted living comes in for me. It's not just about herbs, foods, gardens, and clean rooms, though yes, please stop spraying mystery chemicals everywhere. Rooted living is also knowing where you stand, knowing what shaped you, what your people survived, knowing what stories your body may still be carrying. The plants have taught me to pay attention to place. The history has taught me that place has memory, but ancestry has taught me that memory does not disappear just because somebody forgot how to say their name. So when I talk about Gulf Coast, I'm not just talking about a setting. I'm talking about a relationship, people, land, law, identity, memory, and survival. What was written down and what refuses to die, that matters because we are not just looking back for the sake of looking back. We are facing the question every descendant eventually has to face. What do I do with what I know now? Because once the land speaks, you cannot exactly unspeak it. Once you know the family was erased from a story they helped build, you cannot politely step over that and go back to brunch. Well, you can, but your ancestors have many ways of getting your attention when the story is meant to change within you. I do not make the rules. That is the emotional center of it all. It is not just about the past, it is about what the past asks of the present. When a family has been disconnected from the land, identity, or story, there is grief there, but there is also power in reclaiming that connection. Reclaiming doesn't always mean getting the land back in a legal sense. More importantly, it means telling the truth. It means say what is not random. This was not nothing. This shapes us. This is especially powerful for the Gulf Coast Creole history because so much of it lives in the in-between the empires, the language, the racial categories, in between the official records and the family memory. But in between is not empty. It is where the Creole identity lives, adapted, protected itself, and kept moving. That is why these stories matter, not because fiction replaces history. It doesn't. But story can walk into the space where the records stop talking and ask, what would it have felt like? Stories can give breath back to the people who were treated like legal footnotes. It can help modern descendants understand why a place still pulls at them, why standing on a piece of land you have never technically owned can still feel like coming home. That is the relationship between the land and identity. It has nothing to do with ownership. It is right to say we are here. From Pensacola to Mobile to Bay St. Louis, the Gulf Coast story does not move in a straight line. It moves like water. It curves, double backs, hides in marsh grass, and then shows up generations later asking why nobody finished the work. Maybe that is what the work is really doing. Following the water back to the land and following the land back to the names, because the land is never just land when it has carried your people. And sometimes when your people gets quiet enough to listen, it is the thing that finally says, no more erasing. We are still here. We are Creole to color.